Propagandization, global. In many of my studies and commentaries over the years, I have used the word propaganda quite a lot. Though I know most of you are familiar with the meaning of propaganda, I think it's good to point out the obvious sometimes, just for reassuring clarification. So let me now explain the meaning of propaganda and how it works, and how it is used today. The definition of propaganda is the systematic propagation of a doctrine, or a cause, or of information reflecting the views and interests of those advocating such a doctrine, cause, or view. An organized program of information in support of a cause or political policy or political view. Manipulation of information to influence public opinion. The term propaganda comes from the Latin Congregatio de Propaganda Fidei, which means the Congregation for the Propagation of Faith, a missionary organization established by the Pope in the year 1622. Now as then, propagandists emphasize the elements of information that support their position, and de-emphasize, exclude, or censor those elements that do not. Misleading statements and even lies may be used to create the desired effect in the public audience and perception. Lobbying, advertising, and missionary activity are all forms of propaganda, but the term has most commonly been used in the political arena. At first, depictions, which is to say drawings or pictures, and the written media were the principal instruments of propaganda. But then as technology progressed, radio, television, and motion pictures came into the fold, and propaganda is especially found nowadays in children's television shows and programming, and in children's movies. Propaganda is now even prevalent in the educational institutions from kindergarten to senior high school, and in institutions of higher learning, so as to start this process off at a younger age. Hitler practiced this policy of propagandization of children with his Hitler Youth program, and the world saw it and was appalled by it. But oh, how quickly the world has forgotten. And now with the more modern medium of the internet, there is a new, even more powerful way to spread propaganda. Via blogs, tweets, web pages, internet forums, internet groups, and websites, and all of these, along with the aforementioned outlets, in concert with the left-leaning news media hype and biased partisan propagandized spin on things, have the power to change the way people view political policy or initiatives, or even right and wrong or just and fair. Authoritarian and totalitarian regimes have and do use propaganda to win and keep the support of their populace. In wartime, propaganda directed by a country at its own civilian population and military forces can boost morale. However, propaganda aimed at the enemy is an element of psychological warfare, which can be used very efficiently to break their morale. But of late, propaganda has come to be a very derogatory term because of its dark uses to effect change. And it has become derogatory, rightly so, because these changes are usually not for the better. In other words, propaganda is the practice of using words, pictures, movies, radio, television, advertising, or public speech to mold and shape the opinions of listeners and readers to conform to the beliefs of the propaganda message, whether there be any truth in the message, or only tiny elements of truth in the message, or none at all. In short, propaganda is a device used to change people's minds, to alter perceptions, and to brainwash masses into following a particular view, or a particular political party, or a particular political policy. Propaganda succeeds because of cunning speech, elements of perceived guilt, radical speech, or man-pleasing words to large numbers of uninformed people who can be drawn in unaware into believing or going with the flow, so to speak, of the propaganda message. Many are not even aware that they are daily being propagandized. So the snares set to catch them work very efficiently. It has long been said that a liar will never tell you that he is lying to you. If he did, then you would not fall for his deception. But it has also been said that a wolf in sheep's clothing, though he be a wolf, still appears outwardly to the uninformed as a lamb. How many victims of murder or rape or pedophilia were unaware that they were walking straight into their own doom because they were deceived by the murderer, by the rapist, or by the pedophile? After all, the murderer was not wearing a big neon sign that said, "Beware, I am a murderer whose real intent is to lead you away and then kill you." The same is true of the rapist and the pedophile. So too propagandists of the modern world dupe, brainwash, and indoctrinate the unsuspecting and the unlearned because they use soothing words, words that seem to offer excuses for bad or perverse behavior, or words that seem to offer something for nothing in return. Words that placate to the causes of some who feel their causes are just, simply because many agree together, despite whether these causes are fair, right, or just at all. I see millions today yelling for free health care and calling it a right. But is free health care a right? Well, to some small extent it is, and we already have free health care, because no one is ever turned away from emergency care in this nation. Whether they be a legal and naturalized citizen or not, if they go to an emergency room, they will receive health care. They will not be turned away. Yet by the same token, it is not enough that they just get emergency care when needed. No, now they want it, and they want it free, as if it's owed to them. And why? Because at some point, some soothsaying man, some man-pleasing person, most likely a politician or an activist or a lobbyist, told them that it was their right and that they deserve it. Universal health care, while it sounds all liberating and all-inclusive, actually means regulation, constriction, loss of freedoms, and services taken away from those who have paid their own way and paid in over the years, so that everyone else, including those who have not paid anything, can have something for nothing. The same is true of Social Security. And sure, politicians and lobbyists will tell you that you can keep your current health care plan, because they know very well once universal health care is made the law of the land, then you won't be able to afford your current health care coverage. You'll be forced to accept government health care to have any health care at all. But see, they hide and exclude those facts from you, because once they get you under a government health care plan, then they can deny you services, which is a method of control over you. How does the cunning child molester lure an unsuspecting child? Does he say, "Hey kid, come here, I want to molest you"? Or does he use nice words and make promises of ice cream and candy and even toys? Again, something for nothing. A freebie. A handout. An equalization without working for that equalization. There are words for this type of system. It's called socialist, borderline communist. And lately, the youth of this nation, as well as others, have been seduced and are in love with the idea of socialism, thinking that it will surely never lead to full-blown communism, which they don't fear anyway, because they have no clue as to what things were like only a few short decades ago in the USSR and in Germany. They have no idea what it's like to live in such a society. They live in America, not Cuba, not Venezuela. They have been drunken on freedoms. And why do they have no idea about the true horrors of communism or socialism? because the truth has not been taught to them. It has been censored from their hearing and excluded from their lessons in history. Rather, instead, they have been propagandized with lies, false perceptions, designed to make socialism look and sound like an all-inclusive heroic fight for human rights and liberties and an equalization for all. In other words, nobody is left out. When in fact, it is the exact opposite, and it is an illusion. In other words, these socialist and communistic systems do not liberate nor make free. They only give the illusion of something for nothing. They give the illusion that they are fighting for the little guy, for the worker. They use the war of classes, and they dupe the unaware into supporting their socialistic policies. But in the end, we all pay through loss of freedoms, loss of rights, a devalued dollar, and having what we work for taken away from us in taxation so it can be given to others who have not worked and who live after the entitlement mentality. And it's given to them as bribe for votes. And all this is happening as our government spins us into a hole of debt that we will never be able to crawl out of. And soon that we won't even be able to pay the interest on. And our government continues to print money which we do not have gold nor silver to back up. And by the time people awake to the truth of the matter, it will be too late and the damage will be done. The saying, ignorance is bliss, is very applicable to the influence propaganda holds over mankind. For many believe in things today which have no fact, no proof, or no basis in reality to back them up. Yet they are accepted as the absolute truth as if God himself had spoken them, because of propagandization. We see many such propagandizations today, which again, people cling to as the absolute truth. And sure, some of these propagandizations have tiny, tiny elements of truth in them. But those tiny elements of truth are twisted and turned and used as big tools by propagandists to create untrue perceptions, which will be swallowed by an unaware populace who are ignorant to the real truth of the matter. If you want to see this in action, here's a good example for you. The Go Green, global warming climate change movement. It's everywhere now. Television shows, TV commercials, businesses which make air conditioners, solar systems. They're all touting the Go Green mentality. Now, while everyone should be Earth conscious and concerned for the well-being of our planet, this global warming movement is one of those propagandizations with only a tiny element of truth in it. In other words, yes, from time to time, in Earth's natural cycles, the globe does heat up. But then it also cools down. This has been made manifest by the ice ages which have crept forth over the millions of years and then subsided. Glaciers once covered Earth's continents even to the lower points in the northern hemisphere. We know this to be true because of the evidence the glaciers left behind as they pushed south and then retreated back north. Great crevasses and great deposits. And we also know it to be true because while test drilling for oil, they have found palm trees on the north and the south poles, perfectly preserved in the ice. Yet even though these things are known to be factual, they are seldom ever spoken of or seldom ever delivered to the hearing of those who are unaware of them. We also know that the ice ages, the glaciers coming forth and then backing back up, retreating, have been happening since long before man was ever mechanized, and if we are real to ourselves and accept the truth, long before man was ever upon the earth. But the propagandists exclude those truths from our hearing again and divert our attention by calling everything a crisis or an emergency, which must be acted on quickly or else. But then we have to ask ourselves why. Why did they push this propaganda so hard? The answer is it is an agenda. which is rooting in the building of global government. Because climate change policies and initiatives allow us to legally and lawfully be regulated, fined, and charged extra for energy under the guise that they are saving us from ourselves. They are saving us from destroying our planet by using oil, coal, and eating meat. You see, the authors of all these propagandizations are cunning, and they know how to tug on the heartstrings of man and on the consciousness of human beings. And they do so very efficiently. They will warn us that our coasts will be flooded, and cities near the coast will be underwater. That's really funny because I have been going to the same beach since I was 4 years old, and the water is still in the same place it was when I was 4, save of natural beach erosion due to hurricanes or tide and time. And the propagandists tell us that the earth will soon be too hot to sustain life. But these are all lies and misconstruences of the truth. They are propagandizations, which most, yes, most, I said most, the majority of science and the majority of scientists, now after reviewing the evidence, have distanced themselves from. In fact, most scientists and climatologists say the Earth is now entering a 30-year cooling cycle. And the last 3 winters have set records for snow accumulations and low temperatures worldwide. But let's look at this from the faith-based point of view, because I know that there are a lot of good people out there of faith who are duped by this global warming agenda simply because they are ignorant to the reality. Do they ever stop and think that mankind is the author of this global warming nonsense? And that mankind, in his self-centeredness, actually believes that God is going to allow man to destroy the world that he created? Oh, I'm sure the secularists believe it, but they have proven the flaws in their logic time and time again. They used to use propaganda to scare us that a nuclear war could happen. And sure, one could have happened. Man had the ability to make one happen, but did it? No. Because man was smart enough not to destroy his own planet and his own world. Not that God would ever allow him to do so anyway. Even so, the propaganda continues, as climate change propagandists tell us that they don't just want to clean up the world, they want energy independence. Yet their policies destroy our freedoms, rights, and abilities to stand on our own as the most powerful nation on earth, because through their politics and their policies of climate change, they control us, they regulate us. For instance, the United States has many, many vast oil deposits on land and offshore, which go unused. And why? Because there is a slight chance that the spotted owl, or the river pipefish, or the wild caribou, or the shrimping industry, or the crabbing industry might be affected if man goes into these areas where the oil is and drills for it. Yet while they won't allow us, the United States, to drill for the oil in the Gulf, our government has granted Brazil the right to do so, and even sold them some of our oil rigs to drill in the exact same places we used to be drilling. In other words, while allowing foreign interests to drill where we are not allowed to offshore, i.e. our former oil wells, our own government has drafted laws to keep us from getting to our own oil inland. Now, does this make sense? The government even purchased the vast majority of these lands where oil is located to make sure that it was federally owned and protected, and thus untouchable, without permission of all the executive branches of government, which, by the way, will never happen. Because when was the last time you saw our two-party system get enough votes to agree on anything? That is, anything substantial. And what will be the result of this? Well, the result is that we, the United States, will be kept dependent on foreign sources for fuel and for our energy. We will be kept in the global community and the global family. And we will be made subject to the prices they want to charge us for this energy, for this oil. Many of them, these oil-producing nations, which hate us anyway. And as this happens, we will lose our ability to stand on our own, and consequently, over time, we will lose our constitution and our sovereignty, as we go from being the leader of the world to just a voice in the chorus of global government. And as this happens, we will lose our rights and freedoms and be forced to obey international law rather than our own laws. We will be forced to obey global government rather than our own constitution. And another piece of this climate change agenda and propagandization is the argument over carbon emissions from mechanized corporations and things like mining for coal. Those too have been regulated. We are only allowed to mine for a small amount of the coal that is available and could be used to make energy. But you see, that would make us less dependent on foreign countries for our energy. And those who are in power don't really want that. In other words, the global government agendists. In short, our own government hypocritically tells us that they want to make America strong. They want to create jobs. They want us to be energy efficient. Yet they run businesses out of our country via overtaxation, fines and levies for use of fossil fuels, in which they use in the production of their products, and which produce carbon emissions, or greenhouse gases as they call them. That plus the high wages demanded by unions for their members, who, just by the way, happen to strong-arm and coerce their members to vote for progressive, aka socialist agendas. So you put all these things together, and what's happening? Well, the businesses can't afford to operate in America anymore, so they move out of the United States, leaving Americans unemployed. They build production plants in other nations where they can make a profit, where they can stay in business. But you see, that is another opportunity for the propagandists to use propagandas, lies, and powerful twisting of the truth. Because once these overtaxed, overfined, overlevied companies who were forced to pay high wages to unions move out of the USA because they can't stay in business, the government, specifically the left wing, the progressives, use the argument that these companies left the United States because they were on a quest for greed. They have moved away and left poor Americans unemployed. They've left them to starve. When in fact the companies could not afford to operate in America anymore. Because of the policies of those who overtaxed them, who overfined them, who overlevied them, who demanded more pay for less work, and caused them to move away. But the ignorant, unaware populace of America, who believe anything they are told by the media, fall for this argument hook, line, and sinker, and rail against these companies, simply because of what they believe and are told in the here and now, with knee-jerk reaction. They never bother to do any research into the facts that 59% of taxation in America is of American business. Now I can hear it now. Some will say, I don't believe that. Then they will cling to that old argument and cliche that the rich are evil and should pay way more than anyone else simply because they are successful. This is another childish argument. It is the argument that if you have better toys than me, then life is unfair and I'm not going to play unless you let me play with your toys or unless I can have the same toys as you. In other words, I must have the same as you regardless of whether I've earned it or not. We must be equal. And this is being taught in the schools. Equalization. Why should anyone want to try harder? They now give citations and medals and little certificates to kids that can count to 10, while others can count to 1,000, so they won't feel left behind. Political correctness. And this indoctrination, this set of values that I must have the same as you regardless of whether it is earned or not, is what has ruined things like welfare and gave birth to such things as low-income housing and HUD homes. Which is to say, you tax-paying employed people can go pay full price for your home, while you others who are on welfare and who are low income can get a home at a substantially decreased price and a substantially decreased tax rate. It's the old war of classes rearing its head again. While welfare and these other programs started out as noble pursuits to help the less fortunate, now they have become entitlement mentalities. Entitlements with no checks and balances. Entire generations have been raised on welfare and receive more entitlement and benefits for each child they produce, illegitimate or not. You see how this works? We as a country reward laziness or entitlement behavior. Now payment is not according to what you have done to earn it anymore. Now it's according to what level or class of person you are, or even what race you belong to. If someone has more than you, cry foul instead of working harder. Sue them. Demand. Protest. Bust yourselves in. So, again, we reward bad behavior. I mean, what could be easier than producing children for pay? After all, what human being is there who doesn't love the act it takes to conceive a child, and now we're going to pay them to do it? So then, more children, more pay, despite the destruction of the family unit, despite the environment the child will be brought up in. You get paid to bring forth kids. And many children will be raised in, again, poverty-level conditions, in mostly single-parent or broken families, and they will be raised to feel that the world owes them a living too, or they will be raised to become criminals from living in these conditions. They will be raised by those who feel that working for a living or to achieve status or to achieve your goals is repugnant. And so generations have and will be raised with these entitlement, free-ride mentalities, and as such, they will remain a perpetual voting demographic which can be pandered to by propagandists for votes. Why do you suppose they won't close off our borders to illegals? Because they see the potential of the low-income Hispanic as a potential voting base, which can be pandered to with promises of something for nothing, and propagandized into believing that they, the progressives, are fighting for them, to give them opportunity. And why shouldn't the low-income Hispanic illegal fall for their lies? They don't even make them pay taxes, and they give them welfare and entitlements just as if they were naturalized Americans. It's a simple premise and a simple deception. Vote for me and you'll get it free. Vote for me and you'll get free health care, a free home, free schooling, free food stamps, free medication, free cell phones. We'll even give you gas for your car and assistance with raising your children. That is, unless you're employed and making any money. But other than that, they'll give you anything you want, free, simply for your vote. Simply for selling out your morals and your principles to make a deal with the devil, so to speak. Again, to gain something for nothing. Well, now let's see. Did God in the Bible say, by the sweat of your brow shall you eat your daily bread? In other words, you shall work for what you eat? Or did he say, because you're a poor minority or a low-income person, that you have a free pass to live off the backs of others? I should have said, because you have been told that you're a poor minority or a low-income person, that you have a past to live off the free backs of, or to live off the backs of others. Well, God will come to judge all, the poor and the rich. Where do you want to be in that judgment? One who didn't pull his own weight, or one who did? One who felt they were entitled to a free ride because of events in history, or because propagandists tell you that you are owed these things? What is the truth here? The truth here about what you're entitled to is you are entitled to do the best that you can. That is the greatness of our nation. The capitalist system, which allows you to make as much as you can by as hard as you are willing to work. And you don't even have to be the richest of the rich. You can choose to live modestly. It's your choice. There are people who have been born in America who won't work and won't try, while foreigners who really have been oppressed, and I mean really have been oppressed, not just told they were oppressed by propagandists, who have come to this country and have either become rich or are able to sustain themselves just fine through hard work, blood, sweat, and tears. While indigenous, natural-born Americans have been drunken on the freedoms afforded by this nation and take life for granted and live by the go-nowhere, do-nothing to better themselves attitude. And of course they are left behind in the race. Propaganda is more than perceptions and misdirections and lies. It is also a method of killing the human spirit to strive for better, to turn the hearts and minds from truth to the much easier to swallow lies, to pat you on the back and say, there, you have suffered, when you really haven't. Jesus told the scribes and Pharisees, "Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! You swallow the camel, but you strain at the gnat." You know what that means? That means you swallow the big lies, but you choke upon the smallest morsel of truth. Well, where do you fit into this picture? I realize there are a great many in this equation who have no faith at all, but they are duped right along with the faithful. But let's jump over to them for a minute. Those who claim to have no faith and claim to support no religion. They claim to be neutral. They call themselves atheistic or secularist. Yet these so-called neutral groups, quote unquote, pack themselves into courtrooms and to board meetings and contact the ACLU and sue to remove God and His Word and His influence from everything that they can. You know, if I think something is silly, then I don't participate in it. I will give you an example. Years ago, breakdancing was popular, as was country music line dancing. Both of those were very popular. Now, I was never much of a dancer, but anyway, I felt that breakdancing and country music line dancing were the silliest things that I had ever seen. Yet, people seemed to be having fun and enjoying themselves. But again, I thought it was silliness, so I didn't participate in it. That was my choice. However, I did not contact the ACLU and sue to stop country line dancing or breakdancing from happening, nor did I hold rallies against them. And just because I didn't believe in country music line dancing or breakdancing, I didn't fill myself with hatred for people who did. What's my point? If atheists feel religion is silly, then they don't have to participate. But the fact is, they do contact the ACLU and sue and pack themselves into rallies and courtrooms and disrupt board meetings and show support for their religion. Did he say religion? Yes. Atheism, secularism, is just as much a religion as Christianity, Islam, or Judaism. It is simply a religion with no deity and no set laws as handed down by God, yet it is still a religion. So then it is not neutral as it claims. Because atheistic, secularistic propaganda has not only changed the course of this country through government, it has also crept into our educational institutions. It has made policy. Children are being indoctrinated with its message. And it has taken over in government, and quite frankly has changed the path of this nation and lost us many of our blessings and protections from God. Just count the number of things that secularism has caused to change in America over the last 50 years or so. Of course, many of you probably can't, because you probably never noticed. Because it was covered up. It wasn't showed to you. It wasn't told to you. I know I covered this subject quite a lot, but no matter how many times I cover it, it's always the same and it's always true. Creation by God is now illegal to be taught in public school. It's not allowed. In other words, it is censored. It is excluded. And it is censored by those who so strongly claim that censorship is so wrong and that freedom of speech is an absolute right which must never be denied. That is, unless you're a Christian. Yet they will say it. They will say that freedom of speech is paramount. But tell that to the college professors who push evolution and tell children that man evolved from apes on young, impressionable minds. Children who already probably don't know the truth of their God or their heritage. And then tell that to the other more radical teachers and professors and community activists who teach children and the young immature to hate and despise their own country. They're indoctrinating our children to hate our allies, such as Israel, a people they know very little, if anything, about. They're being indoctrinated to believe that Israel is the aggressor of the Middle East, despite what they have seen with their own eyes and in their own lifetimes that radical Islam has done to America. Despite how Muslims chant death to Israel and death to America, and burn effigies of our presidents, and burn our flag, and make threats against us, and plot to overthrow our government, and plot to do more terrorism. Yet there are still advocates for radical Islam in this country who say that we must never deny them while they deny us. Now, while I can easily understand distrust of government, what I cannot understand are these radical elements in society who teach our youth to respect every other culture and religion except the one this nation was founded upon. The one which gives us our rights and makes us the freest, most powerful nation in the world. But you try censoring something that they want and see how far you get. Now let's talk about how America, and indeed much of the world, has been propagandized to accept other things, such as murder, as so-called choice. Again, remember, propaganda pushes its values and its message and its points of view while excluding or censoring any other point of view. What I'm speaking of right now is abortion. Abortion, murder of the helpless unborn, which is allowed and offered by propaganda as a choice. In other words, enough people finally got together and said, hey, it's okay to murder children because everyone's doing it. Yet when murder is done by an adult, which is contrary to our laws and the laws of God, that is seldom, if ever, met by the punishment deserved, in other words, the death penalty. So one form of cutting off life is completely fine and okay. That is, the pulling of a helpless unborn child from his mother's womb. And the other, putting a murderer to death for his crime, is unthinkable and barbaric. Or at least, say those who it is their agenda to stop the Word of God and propagandize people into believing them. And isn't it funny that the ones who stand for most all of these arguments are either secular or left-wing progressive who stand for nothing but what is ever popular at the moment, or to whomever they are speaking to at the time for whatever reason. And while we're on this subject of that which goes against God, let's talk about the next one, homosexuality and bisexuality. Oh, it's now out of the closet and out in the open, thanks to what is called, to what is propagandized as a fight for civil rights. Now gays and lesbians can parade themselves in our streets barely clothed and mimic sexual acts in public, in front of children even, with an in-your-face attitude. I wonder how long it'll be before pedophiles demand their way, demand to have their civil rights protected, demand to be able to have the right to have sex with minors, male or female, their choice. How do you suppose God feels about all this? What do you suppose God thinks of this propagandization? Well, soon we will know, because the big test is almost here, despite what naysayers say. And sadly, in this big test, the majority will not choose wisely because of being indoctrinated, propagandized, and having the truth removed from them to where they don't know the truth or anything that even remotely looks like the truth anymore. Do you know this happens even in religion, this propagandization? Many believe whatever they are spoon-fed from the pulpit of established religion, which again itself is as full of propaganda as secularism, progressivism, politics of any sort, or outright man-pleasing ways. Propaganda can be found in all the religions of the world, from Christianity to Islam to Judaism. And we have seen all through history the dark consequences and how religion can be contorted, and how men calling themselves religious abuse their powers and forward their own agendas of hatred of others and self-righteous pursuits, and in so doing teach people to do unspeakable acts to fellow human beings, all in the name of religion. They have misled their followers to believe and do things which were not the original messages or charters of their religions, such as terrorism, torture, treating people of other races as less than human beings, targeting people of other religions as enemies who must be killed at all costs. Even in modern Christianity, how many today attend church waiting for some big revelation, some big fresh new teaching? Yet every time you attend church, you get the same old things. Salvation, baptism, love thy neighbor as thyself, be charitable, do good, be right, be moral. Well, these are good lessons to be sure. But I'm sorry, these are things that many people know whether they're Christian or not. So you go to church, yet you never learn anything new. Why? Just because it makes you feel good? Well, most all churches will give you a warm welcome and make you feel good and treat you as family. But what do you actually learn from your church? How many of you spend the 1 or 2 hours you're there looking at your watch during a sermon or falling asleep in the pews till the choir wakes you with a hymn? Why do you suppose that happens? I mean, you attend church because it's the right thing to do. It says in the Bible not to forsake the congregation. But what if you aren't learning anything? What if you aren't learning valuable message from our Father's Word? Haven't you ever felt that there should be something more? That you should be finding more out about your Father's Word than the same old, same old? Well, maybe there's a reason for that. There are churches who call themselves Christian churches, but which either teach nothing more than the basics, or they teach and spend and propagandize God's Word and turn it 180 degrees from its original message. And like the ignorant populace who can't see the forest for the trees, the people in them do not recognize that they are not having anything new revealed to them, or that they are being told lies and fed false doctrine. And they never wonder why there are so many conflicting points in the Bible. They never wonder why the Bible never makes good sense to them. Do you know that there are even, pardon my expression, Christian socialists? Now there's an oxymoron if I ever heard one. Christian socialists who believe that Christ preached socialism due to their ignorance to the true meaning of Scripture because of bad translation or never having been taught the truth. Have they not been propagandized? And then there are other Christians who are just completely at war with God's Word, at war with the laws He gave us, like the death penalty for murderers. And these honey dripper Christians will and do assemble themselves and chant and protest when a murderer, even a serial killer, is about to be executed for a hate crime. There are even those who are angry that America went in and killed Osama bin Laden after all the things he's done. It's unbelievable. And still other so-called Christians go to U.S. servicemen's funerals and disrupt and protest and yell hateful things at suffering bereaved families. Excuse me, but where did Jesus Christ do that in the Bible? And where did He say to do that in the Bible? He didn't. Neither did God. I have seen Christians arguing, using verses against each other as dueling swords. One will say, it says right here in this verse that this is the way. And the other will argue and say, not so, because in this verse it says that is the way. So who is right, and how can we know for certain? Well, really, there is only one way to know for yourself, and that is to do independent study for yourself, which includes going back into the old languages and checking the authenticity of the message you have been given. In other words, doing your own homework. Because until one has studied for themselves, then they have no right and they have no certainty to say what is truth or what is not truth. Until they do study for themselves, all they can say is, well, my church teaches this, or my pastor says that, or our denomination teaches thusly. But what if they're wrong? And what if they're misleading people even by accident, away from God rather than to Him? Is it not important enough to go and look and make sure of the foundation you stand upon? We have seen all through history how propaganda has been used to make change, to bring down kingdoms, to overturn governments, to turn God's children away from the path of light to a path of darkness and deception. We saw it in Russia, the Christian-founded monarchy, which was overturned into the Soviet Union of Socialist Republics, a communist dictatorship which allowed everything but religion. In other words, they outlawed religion. They burned churches or used them as stables and storehouses. And they made dissenters disappear. We have seen it in Germany. In Germany's transformation from a Christian nation to a socialist, fascist dictatorship, which persecuted the Jewish, people of another religion, and indeed anyone who wasn't deemed by the Nazis as fit to live. Nazi, in case you don't know it, means National Socialist Party. And now Americans want that socialism to come here? After all we've seen in the world? After socialism and communism have failed everywhere they've been practiced? Now, we have seen the atrocities in Russia and in Germany, but we have also seen less genocidal, yet bloody examples in places like Cuba, Venezuela, Iran, and Iraq. Of how secularism and socialism, or jihadism, all of it basically the same thing in one form or another, propagandization, twisting of the truth. Now we see that beginning on our own nation. Actually not beginning, but taking more root. We see God, our Father, being evicted in favor of man's worldly wisdom and man's judgment by precedent, which is anything but just. We see things which make very little sense to anyone except those pushing their agenda. The socialist, the secularist, those who are completely anti-Christian in agenda. Despite their outward appearances and soothing words and claims that they want to make America strong. There are even those amongst this group who claim to be Christian. Oh, sure, they approach God with their lips, yet their policies show that they are anything but Christian. They are at war with God and His influence. When you see these things happening, when you see that nothing makes sense, and when you see that these people's words do not match their actions, when their promises are turned into lies to our very faces, then you should know something is up. Perhaps they don't even see it themselves. Perhaps they're too blind to see. Or perhaps they do, and they know exactly what they're doing and exactly where they're taking us. But regardless whether they see it or not, whichever it is, what they do is propaganda designed to fulfill their agenda. And their agenda is to keep America dependent on government. And to keep America dependent on the rest of the world. You see, those who do this have always known that America would never be taken by war. So instead, they are taking it slowly, a piece at a time, right under our noses. And sadly, very few see it. Because they have either been indoctrinated, or they're too busy watching TV, or playing video games, or doing whatever it is they do. And even so, they also have been indoctrinated to support tightening the noose around their very own necks through propaganda. I have said it before, and I'll say it again. If someone stands up for righteousness or truth, they will be labeled as a hater, or a bigot, or someone who wants to oppress. This is nothing new. Jesus was called a liar, a heretic. He was spat upon. He had stones thrown at him. And he was eventually put to death because he dared to speak the truth. And the same fate awaited many who followed after him. Many in this nation today and in the world have been drunken on freedoms and propagandized to the point till very few today know right from wrong any longer. I would utter to guess that if someone stands up and says it is wrong to boil puppies in hot oil, there would be someone somewhere who would say that boiling puppies in hot oil is a right, and it's a freedom, and it's freedom of personal expression and speech. There will always be those who take the opposing view no matter how stupid or insane or unrighteous their point of view is. And as they do this, they will spread their message and use propaganda. But it is up to those of us with intelligence, with common sense, with eyes to see, to keep ourselves from being subject to those who are blind and who have no common sense. Ask yourself if what our government is doing makes sense. Do you buy their lies? Do you buy it when they say that they're making cuts and they take less than a drop from the bucket? It makes as much sense as if a man says to you that he is only interested in your well-being and he would never do you any harm. Yet he begins striking you repeatedly with a blunt instrument. And when you look all dismayed and plead with him and ask him why, he says to you that you're not understanding him. You're taking him out of context. That you are the cause of the problem. You're biased against him just because he wants to hit you with a stick. Yeah, right. It is time for people to wake up to the reality of what is going on in this world. It is time for them to see that they're being indoctrinated. This world is going into the captivity of global government. That much is certain. That is even prophesied to happen in the Bible. And it will be a global union under the false Messiah. But sadly, many people don't even know that, because they're waiting to rapture away. Well, I would suggest that you get into your Father's Word and do some study and make sure that you're absolutely right about what you think. As always, it is my prayer for you that you will dig deeper into your Father's Word, that you will study to show yourself approved. Because propagandization, along with the famine for the end times of hearing the Word of God, is what is causing this mess. It's ruining our nation, it's ruining our values, and it's causing our decline. Will you be a part of it, or will you be one of those who stand strong against it? The choice is yours. Thank you for listening. This has been Just Thoughts.